Next on AM 1480 WLEA, the Newsmaker Show. Here's Brian O'Neill.
And joining now, Hornell Mayor John Buckley. Mayor Buckley, thank you for joining us here on this Thursday morning.
Thanks for having me, Brian. Good morning to you.
Well, you just got back from a NICOM, a New York State Conference of Mayors meeting in Albany. And the biggest thing I took out of it was that even though cities were not cut on the AIM funding, towns and villages were. And you issued a statement on that saying that you were going to stand with the town and village leaders in trying to get AIM funding restored to the towns and villages. What is AIM funding, and how does it affect towns and villages, Mayor Buckley?
Well, AIM funding stands for Aid and Incentives to Municipalities, and AIM funding is that one revenue stream that municipalities can enjoy to really apply to anything that they need. A lot of the funding streams that cities, towns, and villages have, those funding streams are designated for one particular purpose or another. AIM funding can be applied to anything that is a need of the municipality. So there's really no strings with AIM, which is a good thing. And as you know, many towns, villages, and cities, especially in our region, are cash-strapped and really rely on that AIM funding. Just to give you an example of the dollar amounts, the Village of Bath, I think they were slated to lose $103,000. The town of Bath, another $96,000. So it has a very serious impact on municipalities. And the reason I stood up, and even though cities, at least at this budget year, are not affected in the budget, the governor's budget proposal. A lot of the towns and villages are. In fact, 90% of the towns and villages would lose their AIM funding altogether, which would have devastating effects. But if the governor is brazen enough to threaten to cut AIM funding from towns and villages, you can bet that cities will be next in line. And if AIM funding were ever cut from the city of Hornell, you might as well turn the lights out. That would be just devastating to the city.
You mentioned, and you were talking about the governor's priorities in the budget, that the governor was going to push for free college for illegal immigrants at the same time that there was AIM funding cuts to town and villages. Wondering, do you know the amounts? Is it like one's being cut to help the other, or is it just the idea of the priorities and the principle of it?
Oh, it's the misguided priorities. And, when you have a governor and a legislature that's bent on giving free college tuition for people that are illegally here, that aren't even legal residents of New York State or our country for that matter, to me that's a misguided priority. I think you should put your own people first. Concentrate on New Yorkers. How many people that live in our community, work hard and raise their children the right way and send them off to college, and then all of a sudden they're buried in debt because of college tuition and housing and everything that goes along with that. They're not getting a free ride. Why are we even talking about providing people, whether you want to call them, illegal aliens or undocumented residents, whatever you want to call them, they're not here lawfully, and we want to give them a free ride to college. I think that is just fundamentally wrong, and I oppose that. Some studies that I've seen have, and Senator O'Mara and I were just talking about this the other day, $27 million would, just in year one for a cost of that tuition. And at the same time that the governor is proposing that, he's proposing wage increases for inmates in New York State prisons. And it's just mind-blowing that the governor wants to spend all this money on inmates and on illegals, but he's hanging the municipalities, the towns, and the villages out to dry.
Congressman Tom Reed held a press conference call yesterday morning, and we asked him if he was getting any requests for help from towns and villages on this AIM funding cuts. Here's what Reed said.
We will be a resource here at the federal level. whenever possible, with the cuts or without the cuts, to make sure that the federal dollars that can go to priorities that we agree with at the local level, that we can work in partnership to get those resources flowing, not through our state capital, but as you saw in the highway bill, putting mechanisms in law where that money bypasses the capital and goes to our local communities directly.
So it sounds like you might have a resource in the federal government if things don't turn around in the budget, Mayor Buckley.
Yeah, I definitely applaud Congressman Reed's efforts and and willingness to work with municipalities, especially at this time of need. And he's exactly right. The highway bill is a mechanism where if something is written in there, if there's a project for a municipality, a town, a city, a village, if it's written into that highway bill, it bypasses Albany altogether, and that those monies would flow straight to the municipality. And I think that's one way around New York State. There's a lot of federal money that flows through the state, and New York State makes it very difficult for that money to trickle down to the locals in a lot of instances. So, any efforts on the part of Congressman Reed and our partners at the federal level, I'm all for and I applaud.
How about the extreme winter recovery cuts coming out of Albany?
Well, that's another thing. We talk about AIM funding and being not just the rates for cities being flat, but CHIPS funding, and that's the money we use to pave streets, in the governor's budget. That's flat. Again, no increase there. The extreme winter recovery money that municipalities and Hornell included have enjoyed over the recent years, that doesn't even exist in his budget. So he's cut that completely out, and that's money that goes to repair roads and streets because of the harsh winters that we have in this part of the state and this part of the country. The roads take a lot of abuse. The salt and the constant plowing that takes its toll on the streets, and you've seen that. We've done a lot of work here, and I'm proud to say we've done a ton of infrastructure work and a lot of paving here in the city in the last year or so. And but it takes a lot to maintain those streets, and they do get beat up on a regular basis. So when the governor threatens to cut these monies out, and in some instances cut them out, in other instances not have any increase, it just makes it harder on the locals.
Talking to Hornell Mayor John Buckley, one of the early votes that they had, earliest votes in the year, ironically, was on early voting. They voted on that in, what was that, late December, early January. Anyways, they're going to have early voting in New York State. Mayor Buckley, do you have any sense on how that's going to affect Steubenton County and Hornell in particular?
Well, the short answer, Brian, is it's going to cost more. And, and don't get me wrong, I'm all for more people getting out to vote and exercising their right to vote, and I always encourage that, and I've encouraged that for years. And, it's hard to get people out to vote. People, some people are just diehard voters, and then you have that segment that, they, for whatever reason, they only vote for a presidential election, or they don't vote at all. So, New York State passed this package, this voter reform bill, and they want early voting. They want to take absentees, and traditionally, to get an absentee ballot, you have to have a reason. You're going to be out of state, you're incapacitated, you're homebound, or what have you. This proposal, actually, it's been enacted, but this will make it so you can have an absentee ballot for any reason at all. Maybe you just don't feel like going out that night to vote, so you can get an absentee ballot. The other part of it is the early voting, and we're not exactly sure what that'll look like yet, but one of the things that it entails is just having the polling places open at different times. Instead of just on the general election, there might be a series of 3 or 4 different days throughout the month leading up to the general where one could go out and cast their ballot. But there's a cost to that, because the election workers, they're not volunteering their time. They're paid employees. You have to have those sites locked down, which poses another interesting aspect to it in itself. But Basically how it works is the Board of Elections runs the elections throughout the county, and then they bill the municipality. So the city of Hornell, for instance, we have to budget for that every year. What are the elections going to cost? If there's a primary, then that's an added cost. Some years there are, some years there aren't. But having early and often voting will that could triple or quadruple our election costs, which is another unfunded mandate from Albany, because of course when they pass this, they don't attach any new money to pay for it.
It's on the topic of Albany. Usually we carry the state Senate and state assembly budget hearings, which can be very interesting. Kind of lost interest in it because Senator Flanagan took Senator Kathy Young off of the Senate Finance Committee, and I figured there's less of a local connection now. Senator Young is someone you can talk to, see at public events locally. How does Senator Flanagan or some of the others resonate with our local audience? So I didn't cover those this year. But it was interesting to learn out of Albany that Assemblyman Phil Palmisano has just been named Deputy Whip. Deputy Whip for the Assembly Republicans, so he's moved up a bit in the Assembly GOP political structure. Your thoughts on that news, Assemblyman Buckley? Your thoughts on your colleague, Assemblyman Palmisano?
Well, I'm not an assemblyman, and nor do I aspire to be. But no, that's a real nice feather in the cap for Assemblyman Palmisano. I think we all know how hard Phil works on behalf of the folks, and even though Hornell's not in his district anymore, Phil is still such a tremendous advocate and resource for Hornell and the surrounding area. He's just top notch. In fact, when I was in Albany over the weekend, I spent some time catching up with Assemblyman Palmisano and talking about the state of Albany. But that's definitely a nice feather in his cap, and it just shows you how involved he is and in the relationships that he has with his colleagues, the relationship that he has with Leader Brian Cobe, who's the minority leader in the Assembly, and someone that that I've worked with over the years and always look forward to working with in the future.
And for those who don't know what a party whip is or a deputy whip, a couple things they do. They help keep their political party organized, and as it said, they whip up support for a particular position on certain votes. And it sounds like a pretty important role. Assembly GOP leader Brian Cobe referred to Palmisano as one of the best and brightest in the Assembly, so I thought that was quite the compliment for Assemblyman Phil Palmisano. Talking with Hornell Mayor John Buckley. Going to take a quick break, check the forecast. We'll be back in just a moment.
Hey everyone, Carrie here. For years, you've heard my husband, Ken.
Hello, Radio Land.
Explain how Income Store is the place for your next revenue stream. Not to date ourselves, but Ken and I have been helping individuals and businesses grow their revenue since before the internet was even a thing. We've heard countless stories as to why people look to increase their revenue.
Some stories make us laugh, some make us cry.
These stories, combined with our own, have motivated Ken and I to dedicate our lives to help people, as Ken says, who need a revenue shot in the backside.
Whether you want to just learn how, or simply put, you need to generate revenue today, our mission is to serve both.
Our worldwide staff of over 150 help to create amazing resources, our most famous being the iTunes podcast.
Today's growth. You got to check out episode 383. It's truly amazing.
And both Inc. and Forbes have shared that when it comes to generating revenue, Income Store is a can't miss. To grow your revenue today, check out IncomeStore.com.
That's IncomeStore.com.
Checking in now with meteorologist Rob Carolyn, who's got one of those February 14th, 2019 forecasts all lined up for us.
That's right, otherwise known as the Valentine's Day forecast. And, Brian, I know you're a busy guy later tonight, so I won't hold you up. I know you've got big plans. A lot of cloudiness out there this morning across the southern tier. Valentine's Day starting out rather cloudy. Most of it's cloudiness coming off the Great Lakes. We had a few flurries earlier in western New York. Most of that's going to be drying up today. We're going to be warming up in the atmosphere, so we'll kind of break the connection with the lakes. It looks like we'll see a few peaks of sunshine later today, but an overall sunny day. Sunday, that's likely going to be in the Adirondacks. Our temperatures today up to about 40 to 45. Sun came up this morning at 7:07. It'll set tonight at 5:42. If you're headed out tonight, take the umbrella. There's the chance of a couple of showers. We've got a low-pressure system headed our way from the Great Lakes. It'll be breezy tonight at about 35 to 40. Tomorrow, lots of clouds, breezy, scattered showers in the morning. By late in the day, they'll change to snow showers. We'll have a high of 45, but temperatures will start to go down tomorrow afternoon. Clouds, colder tomorrow night, 20 to 25. Lots of clouds Saturday, 30 to 35. And, Brian, looks like some light snow is headed our way for Sunday afternoon and evening.
Back on Newsmaker with Hornell Mayor John Buckley. Mayor Buckley, St. James Hospital. Anything new you can tell us there on the? Well, we know that they've moved into the medical office building, but as far as hospital construction progress, every time you drive by, it looks like they've gotten a lot more work done than the last time that you drive by.
Well, I think you just said it, and all you have to do is drive by and take a look for yourself. It's they're moving at breakneck speed, and I tell you what, hats off to them. They haven't slowed down no matter what the weather looks like. Cold, warm, snow, sleet. They're just cranking along. Making a lot of progress. They're still eyeing next year about this time next year for a grand opening, and obviously the medical village is already opened. We've had a lot of offices up there open, and a lot of the services have already migrated up north to the medical village, and they're doing very well. If you drive up there, you'll notice the parking lots are full of activity, and there's a lot of hustle and bustle up there. I myself, my doctor is located up there, and just had an appointment a week or so ago. Went up and visited him. Very, very nice new digs, and they're all doing well. So that obviously benefits all of us. And one thing I just want to emphasize to the people that are listening to this is now that we have that medical village open in the hospital that'll be open roughly a year from now, I urge you to use those facilities. Go to the doctors, go use those services they have, because it was quite the haul to be able to make that a reality. We were really on the doorstep of losing health care as we know it in the city of Hornell and in our surrounding area. And now that we've had that public support and all the elected officials and all that team building, and we've got this done, now the time where we really need to support that and not only support it to sustain it, but support it in a way where they can grow it. If you look to our sister city, Corning, they have a new hospital built just outside their city recently, and they're already putting in an expansion on their hospital. And one thing that I've always advocated for is the return of maternity services here in Hornell, and that's one thing that I'll always be a strong voice for. And I still am of the belief that if we support this hospital and we show them that we need those services, that one day we can make the impossible happen and return those much-needed services to St. James Hospital.
Talking with Hornell Mayor John Buckley. Anything new on the Alstom front, Mr. Mayor?
Well, actually, I just had a tour of Alstom the week before last. We had our new Assemblywoman Marjorie Burns down in Hornell, and I gave her a tour of the city. I blocked off most of my day, and we toured all the different infrastructure things, and the water plants, and the police and fire, and just kind of showed her what Hornell is made of, and showed her kind of the fabric of it. But then we saved after lunch. We saved the Alstom tour for last, and I remember telling our Assemblywoman, I said, now when you drive around and you see Alstom, you see this big factory, but when you actually go in there, it's really a city within a city. And boy, did we knock our socks off when we went in there, and it was really an eye-opening experience. But Alstom just continues to amaze. They're working on the Amtrak Acela line right now, which is the high-speed rail, and it's really such a neat thing, Brian, when you're walking around Alstom and you can feel all the energy and the vibrancy of the employees and the excitement, and when you're living in Hornell, and occasionally you see one of these trains go by on a flatbed truck and on the semis, and they're taking them to or from. But it's really a neat thing, because this high-speed rail that's being built right here in Hornell, New York, is we are literally the only place in this nation from sea to shining sea that are producing this high-speed rail equipment. It is just flat out amazing, and it's something that everyone in and around Hornell should be proud of.
Mayor Buckley, was there anything I did not bring up in the last couple of minutes? Was there anything any issues I did not raise that you wanted to talk about?
Well, I mean, there's always a lot of stuff to talk about on the federal level. We won't get into all that mess today, Brian. But I just want to say, we've had some bad weather lately. So I always urge people to check on their neighbors when the temperature drops down or when you have those freezing conditions. Check on your elderly neighbors, check on your disabled neighbors. Just a knock on the door, a phone call. Make sure that their water is still running. Make sure that they have enough food and supplies to get through these storms that we've had. And other than that, have a great day. It's always good to talk to you.
Always great having you on, Hornell Mayor John Buckley. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Brian.